What was the first time?
Well, the first time was when the internet destroyed that corporate infrastructure. They fought against it and lost. The second time they tried to absorb this open source and privatise it in the dot-com boom.
That was the late 90s.
Late 90s, which completely went bankrupt. It was a balloon. It popped and imploded. And now again today they're trying to impose corporate control on the internet. But this time they're not trying to do it with technology. They're trying to do it with laws. In just about every country around the world, there's currently laws going through which actually will completely, which the effect of these laws will completely curtail our use of the internet and take us back to before the internet was begun.
Okay, so these failures then, I mean, this third attempt, as it were, to control the internet, to make it safe for the operation of old corporations. Because after all, the internet is big capitalist business itself, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about a split within capitalism here, aren't we?
Well, that's a good point. You can be very pessimistic or very optimistic, and actually, the kind of in between is a bit more realistic. I can say the internet is this open standard which is going to change everything and make the world a better place. It's been a bit idealistic. Or I could say actually capitalism is going to control this. Banish making illegal, change the standards the internet's based on, and make it back into this safe place for capitalism to argue, to move within. But actually, it's more likely to be something in between, and that's the interest. That's why we're running a Save the Internet campaign. It's to move that in between bit slightly towards the better side than the worse side.
Well, let's be optimistic. Let's suppose we could have a completely, open source, open internet.
Which is what we've actually got now, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yes, more or less. I mean, there's restrictions on it, aren't there? I mean, this is a very interesting subject. I think one of the questions which, first of all, we should look at what's going through now. Hamish is just talking about. You're just talking about the attempts by legislation. By individual governments, but it's I mean, in visionOntv we hate conspiracy theories, but this is a case where you can say there is one. It's fairly obvious. It's all on the net, but
yes, it's very coincidental that about every country in the world this same legislation is going through. How did that happen? So who's pushing it? What's the agenda? And I think, Richard, you did a little bit of research actually on this, didn't you?
I have, yes. Just this morning, I had a look. This week in British newspapers, just 3 days ago, a report came out. Illegal downloading, quote, cost £1.4 billion last year.
And this is absolute nonsense. It just makes no sense whatsoever.
Yes, I mean it's based on a report funded by the recording industry. Called Building a Digital Economy, the Importance of Saving Jobs in the EU's Creative Industries. And this estimates that, if I can quote the relevant article, it estimates, as I say, £1.4 billion lost in 2008. And the job losses were 185,000. Now, I've took the trouble to have a look at this report this morning. And in all kinds of ways, I suppose, as you might expect if you're a cynical person, it doesn't do justice to the arguments in any way. One of the things it misses out completely, for instance, it assumes that piracy automatically generates loss. And it estimates how much loss. Maybe 10% of people that pirate something, that download a music track or download a film, would have bought a DVD or a CD instead. And it completely fails to take account of the fact that people often trial things and then they buy it because they want the shop version, or they then buy it as a present for a friend, and this kind of thing. And there's a lot of research to indicate that happens. The fact is, though, that CD sales are falling through the floor. There might be other reasons for that, mightn't there?
Well, imagine the horse and cart when the car came along.
Yeah.
Where are the horse and cart manufacturers now?
Exactly. A lot of blacksmiths and horse breeders lost their jobs. A lot of people gained jobs in the car industry.
It's shifting. There's an obsolete business model which is trying to stop progress. And the interesting thing for me is that countries that bow to this business model are at huge economic disadvantage in the next 20 to 30 years, where countries which resist it will have booming economies. So, if in Britain, Mandelson pushes through things like this. They're trying to push through Parliament at the very moment. To push these through is actually going to really seem to damage and undermine our national interest.
Yes, I should say it's absolutely no coincidence that this should be in the British newspapers just on March the 17th, because the plan is to get this legislation, it's held up in the House of Lords in Britain, the plan is to get this legislation through on April the 1st. This would be similar to the French legislation, wouldn't it? Which is a kind of three strikes and you're out, it's called legislation, where if you supposedly commit...
But interestingly, their level of proof is almost non-existent.
Yeah.
They can't. There's no court process. It's as if a business interest can actually cut you off the internet.
So the idea is, if you originally you would get warned, and then legislation would kick in later if it doesn't reduce illegal downloading. It would then you would have your internet connection cut
and
now,
be blacklisted.
Yes, I think so. You wouldn't be able to sign up with Virgin instead or whatever. Which. I know the European Parliament is concerned about the civil liberties implications of this, but it's a very powerful corporate lobby, isn't it? But it's only part of the corporate world. That's what interests me, isn't it? You've got sort of Rupert Murdoch on one side, and you've got, for example, and you've got Google on the other side.
Well, internet is becoming a human right. It's becoming, as important as fresh air and water and houses. It's part of our societies now. So to cut people out of society for doing something like breaking copyright, which makes no sense in the digital world. Every time you go to a web page, you make a copy of that page. Copying is the nature of the digital world. So this idea of putting these artificial barriers, which may have been applicable for the physical world, but have no relevance for the digital world. The digital world becomes a gift economy, where these gatekeepers, the old business model was one of gatekeepers, where you had to buy a newspaper to get the news, you had to physically put money across to get the news. With digital information, that physical object isn't there to be sold. There's no anyone can make it. Once one copy is made, you can make 1 billion copies at marginal cost. So there's no gatekeeper role. So you can't charge for things. The only way of getting support on the internet is if people want to support you. So people have to work out new business models based on that. And these old ones, we can't legislate them in place. It just makes no sense in the digital world. It's nonsense. Distribute as widely as possible, then monetize from the gatekeeper role of holding the things and then letting them out for payments is gone. Distribute widely, then monetize afterwards.
Exactly. We know this from the video world. I mean, our project is Creative Commons. So you put out, you don't put up any barriers to people watching your film. We'd say this to all filmmakers, because a lot of filmmakers are very anxious about this, and they support this legislation which is going through.
Scary.
Without realising that, one, it can't work. It can't work because the internet doesn't work like that.
They'd have to break the nature of the internet for it to work, and the internet is such a part of our new economy. Google, eBay, etc., Amazon. It's the growth area of our economy. So to break the engine of growth in a capitalist economy would be very problematic.
Absolutely. I mean, so coming back to my example of the musician who puts their tracks out for free, they then have many more gigs. That might be a lot harder work than selling a CD, but we might say it's more socially beneficial work, yeah? That direct contact with the public.
And it takes away the gatekeeper. They can just do it themselves. Human beings love to do things themselves and to feel real community, real connection, and the gatekeepers were always, was a barrier to this interaction, which is human. I think our society has become very inhuman in many ways, with stars and celebrity and telly and all these people over there, and all these passive consumers and people living the life. And people living the life aren't happy, and the passive consumers aren't happy. Nobody's happy. It's a really bad society. And digitalisation disrupts that. The outcome, I don't know, but it disrupts it, and it gives the possibility of change, which I quite like.
Yeah. So potentially we've got something much more revolutionary than normal political revolutionary change.
Yes. Because it's a change within the system, and kind of politics has been made irrelevant. Politicians are now running around trying to be relevant, but actually, if you look at what they talk about in the House of Commons, it's embarrassing.
Over this act.
Over this act, yes. The lack of knowledge within the political class about this digital transition is just embarrassing.
Okay, well, on that positive note, we'll be back later to talk about other aspects of the internet being under attack and what the hope is for the future.